what does the Taliban comprise of? It comprises of mercenaries, madrasa-trained mercenaries who are loose cannon, who can be hired by anyone for any cost for any task. The ISI would hire a few of them in case it needed to and try and pump them in and say it's the Afghanis.
Namaste everybody, welcome to Chithi Media. My name is Sharan Sethi, your host. In today's current affairs show, we are joined by Major General Harsha Kakkar. We will be talking about Prime Minister Modi's visit to the United States and the Quad summit that has happened over there because it is of a strategic importance. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. Namaste and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's always a pleasure to hear from you. So we are looking forward to this show. And on that note, let me ask you my first question. What do you make of the Prime Minister's visit to the United States, especially given the geopolitical tensions that have been going on in Afghanistan?
See, the visit took in a lot of issues. Afghanistan was one of those that were covered. The expansionism of China, the support, or in fact, I wouldn't say Afghanistan as such, I'd say AFPAC, which is basically Afghanistan-Pakistan combination. The growth of China, the importance of the Quad, which is moving forward. Also, a lot of clarification on the AUKUS, that is the Australia, UK, US deal. A lot of things happened. And of course, it ended up with the address in the General Assembly where there was a lot of statesmanship shown by India, projecting itself as a global power. So overall, I would say the visit was successful.
Right. And given the fact that there has been a lot of talk going on about maritime security, particularly in the Indo-Pacific, can you tell us the distinction between what Quad as an entity is trying to achieve and as opposed to what AUKUS is doing?
See, firstly, AUKUS is a security pact. Okay, which means that until Australia gets its own nuclear submarines, the US and British submarines will operate from Australia or will keep coming and going.
Right.
It's a security pact to ensure security of Australia from Chinese threats. Chinese have expanded so much so that Solomon Islands, which is fairly close to Australia, has voted to quit its relations with Taiwan and join up with and back China. Chinese Belt Road Initiative is coming into that country, so automatically it will fall into a debt trap. Now, all of these, plus other Chinese inroads into South Pacific, are a threat, basically Australia. So for this, it adds on to the security. There was already an Australia, New Zealand, US security pact, which the US discarded in favor of New Zealand somewhere in the 80s when New Zealand declared itself a nuclear-free zone and wouldn't permit nuclear vessels of any nation, including the US, to come into its waters. So now there was a need to draw in UK because UK felt bad when the initial pact was made and it was not involved. After all, it's the head of the Commonwealth. Now this pact will also give a lot of extra teeth to Australia in terms of funding its nuclear submarines and other nuclear requirements, weaponized requirements.
Right.
Now, Quad alone is not Quad is not a security pact. It is more of a diplomatic outreach. Mm-hmm. Security being one of the aspects of Quad.
Right.
If you look, you're dealing much more than just security. You're looking at COVID, you're looking at climate change, you're looking at countering China's Belt Road Initiative. You're also looking at security. So Quad is much more. And to say that a Quad is going to be overridden by AUKUS is wrong. In fact, I would say that AUKUS will complement Quad in terms of drawing in the UK into the same security arrangement. And the fact that the Australia-US 2+2 dialogue, equivalent to the 2+2 dialogue, was held around the same time when AUKUS was announced. And the 2+2 dialogue had a very direct reference to Taiwan. So basically, it's only going to be adding teeth to Quad. And it is not going to be in any way diluting the capabilities and the abilities of the outreach of Quad.
Right. Sir, I'm sure you must have watched Prime Minister Modi's speech at UNGA. What do you make about the important points that he brought out this time? Is there any underpinnings that you observe?
No, I think what he spoke this time was basically projecting India, the Indian system of democracy, which was to counter all those who kept criticizing that India is not democratic, is what he sought to project without hitting out at by any names.
Right.
Projected concerns in Afghanistan, terrorism, plight of women, plight of children there, which is vastly different from what his counterpart from Pakistan was projecting. It's a global view, which is a concern of humanitarian aspects in Afghanistan. And the fact that no one is going to look at Taliban unless it fulfills its promises of basically human rights and inclusiveness.
Right.
Then when he spoke about the UN and expansionism of China, it indicated the growing confidence in India to deal with the Chinese threat. You don't have to mention it. Expansionism and exploitation of the seas is only one nation.
Right.
At the same time, when you talk about the ease of doing business, you're again hinting at one nation. So basically what he did was he projected the fact that India is no longer a weak nation which is scared of Chinese threat.
Right.
India is capable enough to handle it. Then the confidence that he gave the world in terms of Indian support in development, in COVID, in every other sphere. And finally, telling the global business community, come to India and invest. We are the right destination. So I think it was a very well-rounded speech, where he conveyed what he had to convey to our neighbors, conveyed about India to the global community, and countered comments which are being made on the Indian systems.
So do you think there will be a change in America's policy towards Pakistan, especially given the current developments in Afghanistan and that Pakistan has stabbed America in the back several times now? Do you think that there will be a strategic shift towards India? And also, if I may ask you a supplementary question, where do you think India is placed in America's strategic vision for the 21st century?
See, there is already a strategic shift from Pakistan to India. The fact is evident that India is a major strategic partner for the US. It needs India as much as India needs the US, or in fact, I would say it needs India more because its bases are way away.
Mm-hmm.
It knows India is the only power which can counter the Chinese. It knows India is a growing economic power. And India has the capability to hold on its own. Now,
Right.
as far as Pakistan is concerned, you've got to realize that firstly, it's not a frontline state. Secondly, if the US is to monitor Afghanistan, it needs to use the airspace of Pakistan for overflight of its drones.
Right.
Thirdly, is the concern of the spillover from Afghanistan of the Talibanization towards or into Pak, which is to some extent visible, in which case there are concerns over Pak's nuclear assets.
Right.
But the fact is that Pak, and if you look at the US strategies coming out for the current and the near future, it is Indo-Pacific, it is China-specific. Russia is not a major concern. So with the bargain, what you're actually getting is that
Right.
you're finding the shift moving from AFPAK towards China. So automatically, Pakistan and Afghanistan are not on the radar, anywhere close on the radar. But at the same time, they're not going to be fully ignored.
Right.
But yes, if you look at the way the US is blaming Pak for its failure, it did that with Cambodia when it failed in Vietnam.
Mhm.
It's blaming Pakistan in a similar manner.
Right.
But at the same time, what it's doing is it's making it very clear that as far as Pakistan is concerned, we are viewing you through the eyes of terrorism in Afghanistan, through the form of government that you've created in Afghanistan, through the terrorist groups that you support.
Right.
We're not looking at you as an independent nation.
Yes.
So there is already a shift, and that shift is marked. Let's see how more pronounced it gets in time to come.
Right.
And if Imran Khan continues making loose statements like the Taliban can be a partner for peace with the US, I think it is going to be more and more pronounced in time to come.
Right. So you make a couple of very interesting observations, but I have to ask you this. Now, if America has India in its strategic vision for the 21st century, and if Russia is not that big of a strategic competition anymore to the United States, why does it react so sharply when India procures S-400?
See, there are, firstly, there are technical reasons. After all, the S-400 will be used to basically, detect friend or foe. So when you use it to detect friend or foe, you're feeding in signatures of aircraft, of helicopters, of drones. So when you're feeding in the signatures and the maintenance is going to be partially with Russia involved, and of course, with the electronic chips that are now available and being used in all equipment, there's always a means of the input reaching back to the manufacturers. Second, when you align yourself with a particular field, commonality in equipment implies commonality in, you can even say in terms of communication, in terms of interoperability, a lot of other things.
Right.
So that is what is the preference. Third, no matter what, the US seeks to basically pull down Russia, even if it's not a major threat, to ensure it doesn't become a threat in the future.
Right.
So it will seek to keep pulling it down. And one way of pulling it down is economic.
Right.
If you recollect, the Soviet Union basically broke up on economic grounds. And one of the causes of economic grounds was an arms race.
Yes.
Which suckered the economy of the Soviet Union, in addition to Afghanistan and others. So the intention is to keep it under pressure.
Right. You're very right, because the Russian economy is completely dependent on oil and weapons manufacturing. So in that sense, it makes all the more sense for the United States to do this. So in that sense, we've seen what has happened in Afghanistan. And of course, like, we are very concerned about the security threats that may come towards India and specifically Kashmir. Now, that is one question as to how India can or should be aware of what is to come in the future, especially with the Taliban in power. And the second factor is, could you also tell us if the Taliban will remain as united? Because we've seen that there are reports emerging from the Taliban, from Afghanistan, that there have been internal disputes, especially with the Haqqani network, over a power struggle. So how are these two dynamics going to evolve in the near future?
If you look at it in any country, wherever a new government is come into place over the manner in which the Taliban did, there will always be a fight for the spoils. Okay. It is common, it's human nature. Fight for the spoils is carrying on in Afghanistan. Pakistan wanted to push forth its own agenda. Agenda was to get in a totally pro-Pak government, which is Haqqani dominated. It wanted to push away moderates so that there is no question of them moving out without concurrence of Islamabad. I would say Rawalpindi. Islamabad is the wrong place. So basically, that was their intention. At the same time, any government in Afghanistan needs to survive. It needs to keep the country fed and looked after. You can rule it by brute force for some time. You can't rule it by brute force for eternity.
Right.
Right. And you saw Bangladesh, when it was created, it was brute force to try and suppress. Ultimately, it failed. Here also, you've got various groups who would be supported from their neighbors. So brute force to suppress the population can be there for some time. But if you've got to govern, you need funds, you need resources, and you need countries which are willing to help you.
Right.
Now, some countries like China will only put in money provided there's absolute peace and they can exploit. The projects India did were not to repay back.
Right.
Because nothing of them are to repay back. The projects India did were for the people, which even the Taliban or the Haqqani, whichever government is in power, recognizes. So they would definitely need Indian support in addition to the Western funding.
Right.
The question is, why and how should India get in? India will only get in provided you're going to request and you're going to create a conducive environment. India is in no rush, as the rest of the world is in no rush. So let us see how it goes. Internal turmoil in Afghanistan is going to continue.
Mm-hmm.
That is the governmental turmoil, because there'll always be a fight for power. You will try and get in to create an inclusive government. You will get in people into some left, right, center slot to show that you've done an inclusive government.
Right.
Will the world accept it?
Yes.
After all, everyone is well aware of how things run.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's see how it goes. But India will only come in provided it is satisfied that the conditions for its involvement are ideal.
Right.
Only then will it step.
Right. My second question was about the security in Kashmir, especially because what experts are saying is that, the Taliban is not the same as Mujahideen, and the environment today is not the same as 1996. So what are your views on this?
See, no Afghan government is going to mention or get involved in Kashmir. You've got to realize, what does the Taliban comprise of? It comprises of mercenaries, madrasa-trained mercenaries who are loose cannon, who can be hired by anyone for any cost for any task. The ISI would hire a few of them in case it needed to and try and pump them in and say it's the Afghanis. It doesn't mean it's the Taliban government which is moving. Okay.
Right.
Next, in case they've got to operate in Kashmir, they need to get in. Unless you get in, you can't operate.
Right.
If you've got to get in, you've got to infiltrate. To infiltrate, you've got to manage to break through the chain. Hardly any infiltration attempts have succeeded, number one. Secondly, the local population needs to support you. Without local population support, you cannot succeed. Either you stay up in the mountains and live on your own,
Right.
but if you have to operate, you need local support. If
Yes.
the local support is lacking, you're not going to succeed anywhere. Today, the local support concept has changed.
Right.
So there is a lot of change. And there can be nothing like the Taliban government talking of Kashmir. The distance may not be much. But the fact is, you can't, as a government, you can't send the entire Mujahideen force from there towards Kashmir. It doesn't work.
Right.
So those few whom Pak will hire from there.
Right.
But basically, what you can get as a difference is you will find the training camps of the Pak terrorist groups now located in Afghanistan.
Right.
Which means Pakistan would claim that we have no control of the terrorist groups because they're not with us.
Yes.
At the same time, when you tell Afghanistan the terrorist camps are there on your soil, they will shift overnight because these are not permanent structures.
Yes.
So that is what may happen, more
Right.
likely.
Thank you so much for those points, sir. I know that you're in a hurry, but let me ask you this last question and then we'll conclude. Now, what do we do about Pakistan is the biggest question, because it seems to have been a major victory, a major boost in their morale with what has happened in Afghanistan. So in that sense, there have been calls by the international community to sanction Pakistan. Now, India is moving closer towards the United States. But in that sense, we are not really seeing any actionable suit taken against Pakistan by the international community. What can be done, sir?
Nothing. sit back and watch. Because if no one is willing to fund or feed Afghanistan, you can give humanitarian aid for the people. But if you're not going to fund Afghanistan, how are they going to pay their mercenaries?
Right.
You don't pay them, you don't pay salaries. There is bound to be a situation coming up which is not going to be conducive. Right?
Right.
So who's the guy who's got to handle it? Pakistan and China. Let them do it.
Right.
Let them suffer. Why do you think the world is not bothered to speak to Afghanistan? And which is the only country crying to the world saying, recognize the Taliban government, give them a chance, support the Taliban government, provide them with this. Which is the only country which is crying? Afghanistan is not crying.
Yes.
It's Pakistan which is crying. Why? Because it knows it can't bear it and it has to bear it, and the world is sitting back and watching.
Right.
What was the only thing Qureshi was doing in New York? Telling the world, interact with Afghanistan, recognize the government, stop, lift the financial aid, release their 9.5 billion. What did China say in the G20? Release, don't use their deposits or their funds which are linked to New York or to the US banks as a lever for blackmail.
Right.
What did Imran Khan say? Did the world bother? So you don't have to do anything, you just watch the fun.
Right. Makes all the sense, especially given the fact that even Roosevelt Hotel has been is out for sale in New York, and that is where the Pakistanis are supposed to get together for chit chat. And that just shows the state of economy and security in Pakistan. And I think you're absolutely right in saying that. Just lie back, relax, and watch the fun.
That's it.
Thank you so much for joining us, Major General Harsha Kakar. It's always a pleasure and an honor to talk to you, sir. And I hope you can join us for more such conversations in the future.
Done. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
And to all our viewers, please do like, share, and subscribe to Chitti Media. My name is Sharan Sethi, and you're watching Current Affairs Show for Chitti Media. Stay tuned.
Please remember to subscribe to us and switch on the notifications for this channel. For our other social media links, more content, and to support our work, please visit citti.net. Dhanyavad. Namaskar.